And of course, the mobile communication has not discriminated as the initial technologies, because even the rural folks now are widely accessible to the communication services thanks to the mobile coverage. And so when we consider, or rather we look at the Kenya's mobile penetration, which basically has increased from 0.53% in 1999 to the current 77.9%, it puts Kenya almost to a global penetration rate where, according to ITU, by the end of 2011, the global mobile cellular subscription reached 6 billion. I heard the Secretary General now talks about 7 billion perhaps as of date. And if you compare that, which represented an 86.7% penetration globally, while the developing countries was at 78.8%, then it means Kenya right now is almost at a global penetration rate, averagely. Now, one significant important that Kenya went through was the change of regulatory regime, and which I want us to look at, because initially we had a technology-specific licensing framework where the licenses that the regulator issued had certain limitations because of the score, giving them on a technology basis. And so those licenses had limitations on the scope of what the operator or the service provider can provide. And so basically that, in a way, curtailed the development. But then CCK changed its regulatory strategy, or rather framework, and this was quite a significant move that has facilitated a lot of development in the mobile communication industry in Kenya. Now, due to the technological convergence, we decided to ensure that we change our regulatory framework from the technology-specific ones to the technology-neutral. And the main driving forces for the change were that the technological advancements in the methods of provisioning were making it necessary for us to change. And then the issues of convergence and single network platforms were a key factor, because then it made it a lot of sense for the mobile operators or any other service provider to use one single platform to provide, or rather to manage several technology platforms. Then other issues were networks and service boundaries that were diminishing. The change in the global regulatory framework was also a factor that we took into consideration so that we can also align ourselves to the global trends. And so we came up with three basic licensing framework, rather categories, where we had, under this ULF, we had content service providers, which were basically meant then to provide any form of content services, such as the multimedia, data processing, and other information services. And this encompassed the other categories, the initial categories like the premium rate service providers. We also had the application service providers, which were basically going to provide the internet services and, of course, any other form of resale services. Then over and above the services, two service category licenses, we had the network facilities providers, which were divided into three tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, which are basically giving the different scopes of the service, of the infrastructure that can be developed. And of course, we have the international gateway and the submarine as part and parcel of the network facility providers that we could license. And the change into this framework basically widened the scope of the services of the cellular mobile operators quite a bit, because all the cellular mobile operators were translated into the three licenses. So if you had a mobile license, then during the transition, a mobile operator was entitled to get all the categories of the licenses, basically then widening the scope of what they could do. Then over and above that, the operators were also allowed to construct their own international gateways. So the key objectives of the unified licensing framework were as follows, but notably, I think the ones in green perhaps carry more weight. And that is to encourage innovation in the provision of services, e.g. electronic financial services, remote tracking, and over GSM, etc. And as we shall see in the in the following presentation, we'll be able to see how electronic financial services has come of age in Kenya. Then the other issue was to create a one-stop shop for users so that users are not going for different forms of services like fixed or data or whatever from different operators, but then using one operator, then the user could be able to get services that they need. So the impact of the unified licensing framework was that there was increased demand for licenses, because basically the initial licensing framework made it a bit difficult because for people to invest, especially the local investors, could not find it very easy to do so. But then with the new framework, the ASP category and the CSP category became quite affordable to local investors and young innovators. And so there was a lot of demand for licenses. And there was also the increased scope of licenses, which with the limited restrictions. Initially, the technology-specific licenses had several restrictions, as I've already said. But then with this new licensing framework, then there was basically no restrictions on the services that operators and service providers can provide. And then, of course, this also increased the interest and the participation of young technology-savvy population within the country, which has resulted to a lot of innovations that are going on at the moment. And so, okay, I'll try to be a little fast. One of the hallmark of our mobile communication services is the provision of financial services. Over and above, of course, the list that I've already provided there, which I don't consider exhaustive. Of course, there are a lot of things that maybe are not listed over there. And the drivers of the innovation and innovative applications of our mobile networks include the adoption of technology-neutral licensing framework that we've already looked at, the ubiquity and accessibility of mobile networks as a result of wide coverage, and then the remarkable penetration rates that resulted. So, as I said, mobile financial services has become a key service, rather innovation. And actually, just to let you know, is that it is something that began in Kenya and which is now being exported around the globe. And that is something that we are proud of as a country. And we are grateful to the innovative populace that we have back in the country. And this basically is the provision of financial services through the mobile phone networks, and it represents the convergence of mobile telephony and financial services. Basically, it supports three main areas, and those are the mobile payment platforms or transfers, and we have mobile finance and mobile banking. And some of the components that it has are also there. And so from a global perspective, we'll look at mobile financial services to include mobile payment, as I've already said, the mobile finance. Under the mobile payment, we have the person-to-person payments, we have business-to-business payments, and we have customer-to-business payments. While under the mobile finance, we have savings and credit facilities. And this is not something that you walk into the bank to do. You do it right on your phone. And of course, we have banking transactions and banking information. Now, the mobile services were actually launched. The first one was launched in 2007. The brand name of that mobile service was M-Pesa, which was launched by Safaricom. Then the second one was launched the other two were launched in 2009 by Airtel and ESA, whose brand is UCash. And then we had Orange also launching theirs in 2010. And some of the mobile financial services that we have currently include electronic funds transfer, utility payments, such as water and electricity, point-of-sale services, like in the supermarkets or retail shops. We have banking services which involve deposits and withdrawals. Of course, you can even do a finance bank account statements and things like that. So basically, the mobile financial services have tremendously transformed the manner and the way in which people go about doing their businesses, because at the convenience of your bed, you can actually share funds with your parents or your relatives. You can pay your bills without having to suffer over long queues in the banking halls. And you can actually pay for whatever goods and services that you wish to buy. Now that diagram basically shows the flow of electronic cash and hard cash between the agents of electronic funds transfer services. And those represent maybe some of the outlets, the financial service outlets, where you can actually get the the services through the banks or through mobile payment agents or even through automatic teller machines. Basically, as I've already said, you can query your water bills at the comfort of your bedroom and even make payments for your water bills. The same applies to electricity bills. You can do the same. And as I've already pointed out, you can carry out electronic point-of-sale services. Now, one of the success stories about mobile banking it can be illustrated by this picture where we have seen the stories of what has transpired, and especially since the launch of this service, which was launched in around November 2012. And as you can see, in just less than 1 month, the total amount of deposits, went to around 976 million Kenyan shillings, which is just about $10 million US. And then within the same period, there was people had already started, getting loans from the same. So you deposit cash through this mobile banking service, and then you then can be able to get loans. And so these were basically the stories of those who are getting the services. And as you can see up there, somebody was saying that I love the service. I have done it. I've done all. I've saved, taken a loan, and paid back, and checked his balance. Another story. Sorry.
We have to speed up a little bit.
Okay. So basically, that's another mobile banking service. But then I've just given that pictorial. But then a number of banks already now provide a similar service. Then, just to give you a bit of the statistics about what has happened, is that the transactions right now are doing something to do with 11.2 billion transactions annually, and that is in billion US. And of course, we had already talked about the drivers. And you look at the challenges. Some of the challenges that we actually experience are issues of fraud, false identification, customer lock-in, because of course it's possible for the mobile operators to use it as a tool that makes sure that they are able to retain their customers. And perhaps some of the priority areas for consideration, maybe for those who perhaps would want to invest in this, or perhaps would want to help our African brothers, is that whereas this provides financial inclusion, there's need to incentivize innovation, but while also